Cheddar's opening bell. Well, President Trump taking to Twitter this morning to question the story of a Buffalo protester. He wrote, quote, Buffalo protester shoved by police could be an Antifa provocateur. 75-year-old Martin Gugino was pushed away after appearing to scan police communications in order to black out the equipment. I watched. He fell harder than he was pushed, end quote. The president went on to suggest that this was a setup. That protester does remain in the hospital. 2 officers were charged with assault. And it comes as the president plans to head back to the campaign trail and hold rallies again in 2 weeks' time. Joining us now to discuss this is Eugene Daniels, a reporter at Politico. Eugene, it's great to have you with us this morning. Let's start with this tweet targeting the elderly man and potentially tying him to the anti-fascist organization Antifa. Why is the president doing this?
That's a good question. I think what we know is that, we've all kind of been on Twitter trying to figure out where this came from. OANN, which has quickly become the president's favorite news source because he's been hitting Fox News for some of their polling recently, did a report that basically said this, that the 75-year-old man was a part of Antifa in some way. He was aiming a scanner at the police. This is completely unsubstantiated, and no one's seen that. As you said, 2 of the police officers were charged by a local prosecutor. I think it is kind of what we've seen over the president's career, right? Like, he is trying to seem like he's tough on crime, tough on Antifa, and I think that is red meat for his base, right? In this way, it seems like he is supporting the police, he is standing by police, and whether there's a strategy behind it is a question I think we've been asking ourselves for a very long time. But I think mostly he saw it and it made sense to him. I think he is someone who goes off of his gut, but again, completely unsubstantiated, and we've seen no evidence that this 75-year-old man was a part of any movement other than a protester.
Well, let's talk about the president here in strategy. He is planning to head back to the campaign trail and start his rallies up again. Why now for the president, and what can Americans expect?
Yeah, I mean, poll after poll we've seen since March, since the last time President Trump has had a rally, we've seen that he has been polling behind Joe Biden, whether that's national polling, whether that's battleground state polling, which is, more important and more indicative of how we might see things shake out in November. He's been behind, and it feels like the election is very far away, but it's actually pretty close when you think about it. And they know that they need to do something to get President Trump out there. And he loves nothing more than a rally. He loves nothing more than the excitement that he gets. And something that, we only have one campaign to go off, right? So in 2016, he spent that entire time saying that he was going to win because of all the excitement. He did win. So that is something I think that they're trying to replicate. They're trying to push back on this. Has been happening in the media, which you've seen, protests against him. You've seen Democrats saying things against him. I think he's trying to take back the narrative in some way. And I think it was just a matter of time for this to happen.
So, Eugene, any indication as we show these images as to what a rally will actually look like? Because social distancing at rallies in the past were not a thing. Everyone was shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah. I mean, the president has made it clear he does not think that social distancing is needed at big events like this, right? Like they moved the RNC out of North Carolina because the governor there wouldn't allow the Republicans to have an event where there wouldn't be social distancing. And so I would assume, and it would seem like they would have it in some way where people are maybe closer than health experts would want them to be, and that people might be comfortable doing. Maybe they'll be, we don't know, but they'll probably be Purell and things like that. But other than that, we don't see that his campaign is in any way going to adhere to social distancing rules, which also makes it interesting to see which states he's going to be able to go to, because some governors are still banning large events, right? And we know that his team thinks that they are going to be insulated, as we've seen all these protests happening all over the country. They think that this insulates him in a way, because when Democrats say, you shouldn't be having this because of social distancing, they're going to point to the protests. And I think the logical the logical through line is that protests are one thing and a rally is something maybe a little bit different. So it's going to be definitely be very interesting in the upcoming weeks.
Very good point there, Eugene. I do want to talk about the polling numbers. A recent CNN poll showing the president trailing Biden by almost 14 percentage points. I know you mentioned Fox News earlier. The latest poll there showing the president trailing Biden by about 8 percentage points. What do these numbers mean for the president?
It means that if you dig into the polling that we've seen, it could mean that he's in trouble, right? He's not the person who's coming in to smash up Washington, D.C., right? Like he is the president of the United States, and there's a different bar than an insurgent candidate, right? One thing that we know is also that, the way that he's handled the unrest, and race relations in this country is something that voters do not trust him on. Voters trust Joe Biden more on handling this unrest, on handling race relations, and President Trump's handling of the pandemic, starting with, calling it, a hoax from China. That has all led to distrust among some of the American public about how he handles pandemic and therefore how he's handled his presidency. And I think that's what we're seeing in the polling. And this going to big rallies again is their way of trying to counteract that and put him out front.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what these rallies really do look like in just about 2 weeks' time or so. Eugene, for Biden, as Trump ramps up the rallies and plans to do that, what does Biden need to do to keep his lead?
I think that what Vice President Joe Biden is going to continue to do is keep talking about the issues. He doesn't have the bully pulpit that the president has, obviously. However, what we've seen is that us political reporters are dying to hear what Joe Biden has to say on a lot of different issues. And so I don't think he's going to have any issues kind of like breaking in and having his say. I think his team is going to continue to focus on, especially at this point, reform that is maybe a little bit more incremental, right? We've been hearing defund the police from activists for a while. We started to hear it from a couple of lawmakers, but I think his team, and he said yesterday he was not in favor of defunding the police. And I think that kind of thing is going to continue. We're going to continue to see him calling for proposals. He's going to continue to bash President Trump. And that's going to last all the way until November. Whether or not he's going to go to rallies and feels pushed to go to rallies is going to be something that's really interesting.
Do you think that's going to knock him in the polls, Eugene, given that he made those comments just within the past 24, 36 hours or so, as defund the police has become more of a topic in conversation?
It's hard to say. I think that defund the police has become a little bit more mainstream than it has in previous years, but I don't know that it's gone in as much of the base of the Democratic Party, older African American voters and potential voters, to change how people view Joe Biden. Right? He doesn't do really well with young people overall, so it's hard to it'd be hard to see that him saying not to defund the police would be a huge issue for him. But if he's going to want to bring out these voters of color, young voters of color in November, that's something that his team is going to have to wrestle with, how far to go on police reform.
Do you think he needs to choose a progressive vice presidential candidate in order to get that progressive vote?
I think so. Someone more progressive than him. He's pretty moderate, but I think that's something that his team has been wrestling with, right? I think what's probably more important, and what I've been hearing from activists, what I've been hearing, what we've been hearing from lawmakers even, is that he needs to really think about bringing in a Black woman, if not a woman of color in some way, because with the unrest happening around this country, it would be really important for the Democratic side, who wants to kind of own this issue, to have a Black woman who can speak to these from a personal level. And that's why we've seen people like the mayor of Atlanta kind of come up in the ranks, Val Demings, representative from Florida, kind of come up in the ranks of who can be a vice presidential pick for him because of these issues.
Eugene Daniels, thanks so much for joining us. Eugene is with Politico. It's good to see you.